Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Tuesday the 17th of January 2023. Solution. President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that 30 to 40 million has been allocated to purchase medicines this year, while 10 million more has been allocated to provide for the poor during March and April. Restrictions. Cabinet to hold up 6% of recurrent expenditure of the government and allocate 1% for procurement of medicines. Overdue. Sri Lanka's total foreign debt amounts to $29.9 billion over the past 8 years.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In a top story for tonight, the Cabinet announced that they had decided to freeze 6% of recurrent provisions approved by the government expenditure and allocate equivalent to 1% of the amount to the Ministry of Health. The Cabinet states that 1% would be provided to the Ministry of Health as additional provisions in order to procure essential pharmaceutical medications. The Cabinet of Ministers approved a host of decisions at today's media briefing. Among them was the approval granted by the Cabinet for the establishment of the International Trade Office and establish it under the Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policy. Further, the green light was given to an MOU between the Centre for Atmospheric and Oceanographic Sciences, affiliated to the Indian Institute of Science and the National Aquatic Resource Research and Development Agency, on mutually agreeable tasks such as research exchange programs, capacity building for Sri Lankan scientists for ocean-related disaster forecasting and oceanographic forecasting training. The draft agreement prepared for this purpose has received the clearance of the Attorney General and the concurrence of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal presented by the Minister of Transport and Highways for the Ministry of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policies to proclaim the Interconnection and Development Project as qualified for tax exemption. The Interconnection and Development Project is being implemented to empower identified communities in selected districts of Sri Lanka with the aim of providing safe, efficient and climate-resilient connectivity and strengthening the agricultural supply chain. Under the project, it is planned to develop 3,000 kilometers of rural roads throughout the island in the first phase. The Cabinet of Ministers also approved the resolution furnished by the President for appointing a supervisory committee to manage and guide the activities for the establishment of one agency for investment and export promotion. Further, it had been decided to suspend 5% of the recurrent expenditure in government expenditure estimations for the year 2023 at the meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers held on the 9th of this month. Accordingly, the Cabinet of Ministers decided to withhold 6% of the recurrent provisions in approved government expenditure estimations instead of 5% of the recurrent expenditure decided, and to allocate a portion of equal to 1% to that to the Ministry of Health as additional provisions for purchases of essential pharmaceutical drugs. Meanwhile, the Cabinet has approved the resolution submitted by the President as the Minister of Finance, Economic Stabilization and National Policies to furnish allocations required for extending the period for providing financial assistance proposed by Budget 2023 for the Samruddhi beneficiaries and other vulnerable groups in society from the month of May to September until the proposed new welfare benefit payment scheme is inaugurated upon completion of the ongoing survey. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said today that the government will take measures to ensure that 30 to 40 billion rupees will be allocated to purchase medicines required by the Ministry of Health. Now, President Wickremesinghe made these remarks while attending the parliamentary session today. During this, the head of state also went on to say that the government had allocated 10 billion rupees more in order to provide 10 kilos of rice to the people during the months of March and April.
විශ්‍රාම වැටුප් තමයි අපේ දෙවනි තැන තියෙන. ඊළඟට සමෘද්ධිය ගෙවන්න. සමෘද්ධිය ගෙවුවයන් පස්සේ මම අලුත් වැඩසටහන් දෙකක් කියනවා. ඒ දෙකට මුදල් ගෙනියන්න. දැන් සමහර දැන් චෝදනා කරගෙන යනවා අපි බේත් වලට මුදල් දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. බේත් වලට මුදල් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. තව මිලියන 100ක් දෙන්න කියලා. සෞඛ්‍ය අංශයක ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. අවුරුදු කිහිපය තුලදී බිලියන 50ක බිලක් ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේකයි තියෙන ලොකුම ප්‍රශ්නේ. ඒ වුණත් මේ අවුරුද්දට අඩු ගානේ අපි බිලියන 30ක් 40ක්වත් මේ සැරේ මේ අවුරුද්දට බේත් ලබා දෙන්න වෙන් කරනවා කියලා මම කියන්න කැමතියි. ගිය අවුරුද්දේ අපිට ආහාර හිඟයක් තිබුණා. අපි පෝර ලබලා දුන්නා. පෝර ලබලා දීලා දැන් තියෙන්නේ අපේ කෘෂිකර්ම ඇමතුමා ගත්ත පියවර නිසා අතිරික්තයක් ඇති වෙලා. ඔබතුමා අපිට තව ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති කරලා තියෙනවා. ගිය යල කන්නෙන් ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙනවා. දැන් බලනකොට ඊට ඉස්සෙල්ලා තිබුණේ මහා කන්නේත් ඉතුරු වෙලා. ඊළඟට මේ රටේ වී ගැන හිඟයක් ඇති වෙයි කියලා වෙළඳ අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන් යෝජනා කරලා තියෙනවා. දැන් අපිට තියෙන්නේ වී මිල රුපියල් 100ට තියාගන්න. ඒ නිසා ඒ සඳහා රුපියල් බිලියන 10ක් වෙන් කරලා තියෙනවා. මේ බිලියන 10 පවුල් ලක්ෂ 20කට මාර්තු මාසෙයි අප්‍රේල් මාසෙයි කිලෝග්‍රෑම් 10 ගානේ දෙනවා. නිදහස තියෙන අවස්ථාවේදී අවුරුදු 75ක් තියෙන අවස්ථාවේදී මිනිස්සුන්ට නිකන් බඩගින්න ඉන්න දෙන්න බෑ. ඒ පුළුවන් විදියට අපි මුදල් ඒ සඳහා යොදවනවා. මේ අවුරුදු 75 වෙනි සංවත්සරයේදී මම විපක්ෂයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ අපේ දේශපාලන ක්‍රමය අපිට වෙනස් කරමු. මෙතනදී අපි එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරමු. මේවට සහන ලබා දෙන්න. ජනතාව මේ දුකෙන් මුදව ගන්න. මේකේ වගකීම ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයද ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂ විපක්ෂයට දාන එක නෙමෙයි තියෙන්නේ. අපි එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරන්න. එකතු වෙලා අපි ඉදිරි ගමනට යමු කියලා.
විශාල වශයෙන් අපේ රටේ කැසිනෝ තුල උන්ඩියල් හවාලා ක්‍රමය තුලින් මුදල් ගෙනල්ලා ඔය කියන කැසිනෝ පිහිටුවීමේ අවශ්‍යතාවය. නමුත් විදේශිකයෝ රටට ඇවිල්ලා ඒ අය සෙල්ලම් කරලා ඒ මුදල් අපේ බැංකු පද්ධතිය හරහා ගිහිල්ලා ඒ නියමිත බදු මුදල් අපේ රටට ලැබෙනවද කියන තත්ත්වය තුල තමයි මේවා ඇති කරලා තියෙන්නේ. කරු අමාත්‍ය මේ මුදල් මේ විදිහට රටෙන් යනවනම් මේක පනවල ස්ථාපිත කළ වැඩක් නැහැ. මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔබතුමා ගන්න පියවර ගැන මම දැනගන්න කැමතියි.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා අද අපිට තියෙන සීමාවන් බොහෝමයක් ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදල විසින් අපිට අධ්‍යක්ෂ මණ්ඩලය ලබා දෙන අනුමැතිය තුළ මේ සීමාවන් ලිහිල් වෙනවා වගේම අපිට තවදුරටත් කළමනාකරණය කර ගැනීමේ හැකියාවක් සහ විදේශ විනිමය ගලාගෙන ඒම් වැඩිවීමක් සිදු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම කරු කතානායකතුමනි අපේ රට පිළිබඳව මේ මූල්‍ය ශාස්ත්‍රය පිළිබඳව කතා කරද්දී සෑම තැනකම අදහස් වෙච්ච කාරණයක් තමයි රජයේ ආදායම නිසි පරිදි එකතු කර ගැනීම සහ කළමනාකරණයට ඇති දුර්වලතා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඩිජිටල් කරණයට අනුගත වීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඇයි ඒක වෙලා නැත්තේ කියන කාරණේ ද්විපාර්ශ්වික සහ බහුපාර්ශ්වික වශයෙන් සියලු දෙනා කරු කතානායකතුමනි අපි කරන විමසීමක් සහ මේ ආර්ථිකයට අවශ්‍ය ආදායම ලබා නොගැනීමට එක හේතුවක් උනේ මේ ඩිජිටල් කරණයට අපි ගමන් නොකිරීම. අපි දකිනවා ඩිජිටල් කරණයට ගමන් කරද්දී ඒකට අඩු ආදායම්ලාභීන්ට ප්‍රතිලාභ ලබා දීම වෙන්න පුළුවන්. රාජ්‍ය ආදායම කළමනාකරණය වෙන්න පුළුවන්. රාජ්‍ය වියදම කළමනාකරණය වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපි දකිනවා මේ ක්‍රමානුකූල ක්‍රමයට අනුගත වීම ඉතාම සෙමින් අපේ රටේ සිදු වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් මේක වේගවත් කිරීමට අවශ්‍ය වැඩ කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒ වගේම මින් ඉදිරියට බදු එකතු කිරීම සහ බදු පැහැරහැරීම කියන කාරණා සියල්ල අසාධාරණව සිදු නොවෙන්න අවශ්‍ය නීති රාමුව සහ ඒ වගේම විශේෂයෙන්ම ඩිජිටල් පද්ධතියකට ගමන් කරන්න අවශ්‍ය වැඩ කටයුතු මේ වෙනකොටම ආරම්භ කරලා දෙනවා.
Now, China has assured that it stands ready to work with the relevant countries and institutions with regard to aiding Sri Lanka in terms of its debt. Speaking at a press conference yesterday, the spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Wang Wenbin, said that they support the relevant financial institutions in having consultations with Sri Lanka to seek a proper settlement pertaining to the matter. They added that China stands ready to work with the relevant countries and international financial institutions and continue to play a positive role in helping Sri Lanka navigate the situation, easing its debt burden and helping it achieve sustainable development. He added that they hope and believe that Sri Lanka will work in the same direction and make independent efforts to uphold the legitimate rights and interests of foreign investment and financing partners and maintain stability and credibility of its investment and financing environment. Now, with the hope of competing in the soon-to-be-held local government election, several political parties officially placed bonds today in key districts. Meanwhile, the Election Commission stated that nominations will be called upon from tomorrow onwards till the 21st of January.
Representatives of several established political parties placed cash bonds today in several districts with the intention of competing in the upcoming local government election. Accordingly, the Freedom People's Alliance, competing under the helicopter symbol, placed bonds in Kurunegala and Gampaha. Meanwhile, the Samaga Jana Balawegaya placed bonds in Colombo, Gampaha and Ratnapura districts. A group including Udita Lokubandara also placed a bond in the Badula district today, representing the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Furthermore, a group hoping to compete under the banner of the Jatika Jana Balawegaya officially accepted their nominations at the JVP party headquarters in Batramulla today. The Election Commission stated that nominations for the local government election will be called upon from tomorrow onwards. Accordingly, the Commission will call for nominations from tomorrow until 12 p.m. on the 21st of January 2023. Meanwhile, independent organizations monitoring the election process revealed that incidents of government property being misused have already been reported.
And we'll be back with more news after this short commercial break.
It's hard to keep up with the new when you're listening to the same old Slim Bread Week. A week for professionals.
Welcome back in your news. Now, the Ministry of Finance stated today that a sum totaling $29.9 billion in foreign debt was acquired by the Sri Lankan government. The 9-year aid period spanning from the 1st of January 2015 to the 31st of December 2022. Meanwhile, in a recently released summary on Sri Lanka's public debt, the ministry said that at the end of June 2022, Sri Lanka's total public debt stood at $79.87 billion.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe said in Parliament today that Sri Lanka's debt negotiations with China and India are successful, signalling progress in the country's effort to secure a $2.9 billion bailout package from the IMF.
දැන් අපිට ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ඉන්දියාවයි චීනයයි එකඟත්වය ලබා ගන්න අපි දැන් සාකච්ඡා කරගෙන යනවා. දැන්ට ඒ සාකච්ඡා සාර්ථකයි කියලා මට මේ සභාවට කියන්න පුළුවන්. ළඟදී අපිට ඒ පිළිබඳ පිළිතුරක් ලැබෙයි.
Meanwhile, late yesterday, India formally notified the International Monetary Fund that it would support Sri Lanka's debt restructuring plan.
සාර්ථක ප්‍රතිඵල ලැබිලා තියෙන බව විදේශ කටයුතු ඇමතුමා කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට දැනුම් දුන්නා. ඉන්දියාවත් චීනයත් ජපානයත් අතර එකඟතා ඇතිවීමෙන් පවතින බවත් ඒ එකඟතාවයන් මත ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදලේ ගිවිසුමත් මුල් කාර්තුවේදී අත්සන් කරන්නට ඉඩ තිබෙන බව තමයි ප්‍රකාශ.
President Wickremesinghe also stated that Sri Lanka recently concluded debt restructuring talks with Japan. Until recently, debt negotiations proceeded at a slow pace, with creditors raising concerns on the size of losses they are willing to accept and whether local debt should be included in the restructuring process. Releasing a summary of Sri Lanka's public debt late last year, the Ministry of Finance said that Sri Lanka's total public debt as at the end of June 2022 stood at $79.87 billion. The central government debt claimed 88% of the total public debt, standing at $70.06 billion, which is equivalent to 127.2% of Sri Lanka's GDP. Guaranteed SOE debt stands at $6.63 billion, while the central bank's debt stands at $3.17 billion. Meanwhile, the total public debt of Sri Lanka as at the end of June 2022 amounts to 145% of its GDP. The Minister of Finance also released data on the amounts of foreign debt acquired by Sri Lanka for the last 8 years, spanning from the 1st of January 2015 to the 31st of December 2022. Accordingly, $29.9 billion were obtained by the government as foreign loans during the period. As per the statement by the Minister of Finance, $6.18 billion were acquired by the government of Sri Lanka in 2019, which was the highest recorded inflow of foreign debt within the last 8 years. 2018 recorded the next highest inflow during the period, with $4.96 billion being accumulated in the year.
In business news, the ASPI closed in green as a result of price gains in counters such as Expo Lanka Holdings, Lanka IOC and Brown's Investments, with the turnover crossing 1.2 billion rupees. The SPI ended in the green after gaining 113.72 points to close at 8,376.3. Similar behavior was witnessed in the S&P SL 20 as it too gained 79.43 to end at 2,607.51. High net worth and institutional investor participation was noted in Hatton National Bank. Mixed interest was observed in Expo Lanka Holdings, SoftLogic Life Insurance and Lanka IOC. whilst retail interest was noted in Brown's Investment, SoftLogic Capital and LOLC Finance. Foreign participation in the market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net buyers. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies in the world. Now, Asian share losses widened today after China reported weak fourth quarter economic data, although its investor participation and expectations for a strong rebound in the country remained high, even as concerns increased that the global economy is heading for a recession. The losses took place as two-thirds of private and public sector chief economists surveyed by the World Economic Forum in Davos expected a global recession this year, with 18% considering it extremely likely, more than twice as many as the previous survey conducted in September last year.
MSCI's gauge of Asia-Pacific stocks outside Japan increased its losses to stand down 0.65%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index dropped 1.22% and China's benchmark CSI 300 index slid 0.27% following release of key stats by China and as investors sold gains ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday starting on the 21st of January. National Bureau of Statistics data showed today that China's economy grew 2.9% in the fourth quarter of 2022 from a year earlier, beating expectations but still underlining the toll exacted by a stringent zero-COVID policy. Growth for 2022 of 3% was far below the official target of 5.5%, excluding a 2.2% expansion after COVID-19 first hit in 2020. It was the worst showing in nearly half a century. Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 1.28% following two sessions of heavy losses as the yen's relentless rise paused on the eve of a crucial Bank of Japan policy decision. The dollar drifted off multi-month lows today while the yen was perched near 7-month highs against the currency. Australia's S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.09% after hitting a 7-month high yesterday. European shares reached a 9-month high yesterday with the Pan-European Stock 600 closing up 0.5% at 454.6, its highest level since April 2022.
Now, oil prices were mixed today after China posted its weakest annual economic growth in nearly half a century, with its late 2022 U-turn in COVID-19 policy underpinning hopes of a recovery in the country's fuel demand this year. Experts have also pointed out that although the previous year ended stronger than anticipated, China still faces substantial challenges due to the possibility of a recession in the US and Europe.
Brent crude futures edged up 0.1% to $84.52, recouping some of the 1% loss in the previous session. US West Texas Intermediate crude futures slid 0.9% to $79.15 from Friday's close. Experts highlight that Brent crude has gained nearly 10% over the past 10 days as optimism over China's reopening boosted sentiment. However, the outlook for the rest of the global economy is uncertain. Experts have also pointed to a jump in crude supply from Russia weighing on the market, with seaborne exports having risen 3.8 billion barrels per day last week, the highest level since April. The poor economic data from China still beat analysts' earlier forecasts as Beijing's rollback of zero-COVID policy in December showed up consumption. Data released today showed China's oil refinery output in 2022 had fallen 3.4% from a year earlier, its first annual decline since 2001, although daily December oil throughput rose to the second highest level in 2022. Meanwhile, a rise in the dollar from 7-month lows also put pressure on oil prices as a stronger greenback makes oil more expensive to those holding other currencies.
And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news News and information you can trust 24 hours a day. Visit AdaDerana.lk.